I'm Robert Hannigan. I'm a cybersecurity specialist. Most of my career was in the UK government. I was director of our largest intelligence and cybersecurity agency called GCHQ, the equivalent of the NSA in the United States, and I set up our National Cybersecurity Centre here in London. I also have a role in the academic world. I run a college in Oxford, and I spend a lot of my time in private sector cybersecurity as well. So I started writing this book during the pandemic, and this is a time of a lack of optimism and vision, I think, in economic terms, in political terms, and I wanted to try to explore how do we solve big problems and generate creativity for the future, because we have a lot of problems stacking up, most obviously climate change, but many others too. And there are some lessons, I think, in the secret world and in the history of the secret world, particularly Bletchley Park and GCHQ, which I ran. And I wanted to explore some of the people, how they were recruited, how they organized, how they did the amazing things they did, including, of course, creating the world's first digital programmable computer at Bletchley during the Second World War. So these are amazing achievements in the most difficult circumstances. And I wanted to explore that a bit, really to draw out some of the optimistic conclusions for companies and governments. So cybersecurity threats have become more and more sophisticated over the 15, 20 years that I've been involved. And the biggest change has been the commoditization, if you like, of cybercrime. So it's now very easy to buy cyber attacks as a service. And that has made a big change. And most of the attacks we read about are the result of that change. The next big change, I think, is going to be the use of artificial intelligence, both in attack and in defense. So for cyber criminals and attackers, AI helps them to do more sophisticated attacks at greater scale and at lower cost than ever before. It helps them to do fraud better, to use deep fakes, to trick people into trusting something they shouldn't trust, which is the core of what cyber attacks are about. But there will also be good uses of artificial intelligence for defense, to predict the attacks that are coming. So it's going to be an arms race, as always in crime, and the scale and sophistication of the threat is rising, and our attempts at defense are also getting better. And that's the kind of race we're going to be locked into for the next 10 to 20 years. It's a very difficult time without any question. And on the cybersecurity side, we've seen with the war in Ukraine, the use of cyber by a nation state to undermine another nation state. We've also seen some fantastic examples of cyber defense. So we're seeing played out in these conflicts the use of new technology. We will see more use of artificial intelligence and other advanced technologies in conflict. And of course, the world is in danger of polarizing around two big powers that are both technologically advanced, the United States and China. And a lot of the next 10 to 20 years is going to be about how that is managed and how those two big blocks can work together, whether they can work together. That's a key challenge for all of us. And a lot of it will be expressed through technology and technology dominance. And so there is a big drive to keep ahead in democracies, especially on the latest technologies. And that really matters to all of us and to our economies. So there are some great examples in the secret world of how leaders brought together the right talents, sometimes very unusual, what we would now call neurodiverse talents, and in modern GCHQ we do call neurodiverse talent, how we brought together different groups from different backgrounds with different skills to work together to solve big problems and to be creative. And I think that has particular demands on leaders. They have to be tolerant, they have to understand the kinds of people they want to recruit and how to get the best out of them. there are some really good examples from the secret world of how this has been done successfully with amazing results, not least the creation of computing and some advances in artificial intelligence and encryption that wouldn't have happened without those kinds of empowering leaders. Well, they already have an incredibly dominant role and arguably a group of monopolies. And I think one of the things I explore in the book a bit is the wonderful things about big tech and what the companies have created over the last 20 years tend to ignore the downsides. So we're all very familiar with the advantages of social media and what that can do in bringing people together around the world. But I think tech entrepreneurs have not been very good at looking at the downsides of these products and services. They haven't been good at understanding what bad people will do to abuse those. And their business model isn't really cut out to take account of misuse. And one of the reasons why they're in such trouble around the world, I think, is because they can't really cope with the misuse of their own technologies. And so the challenge for governments, I think, is to regulate them better, and the challenge for users to understand them better. And one of the chapters in the book is about the role of the secret world in spotting some of these problems and not being overexcited by the latest great thing, because the latest great thing, great as it may be, will always have some downsides. Well, the amazing thing about Bletchley Park is, and it created this incredible breakthrough in constructing the world's first digital programmable computer. But the amazing thing about the team that did it is that 75% of them were women, and nearly all of them were under 30. So this was an organization of 10,000 people at its height that was predominantly female and overwhelmingly young. And there are some really interesting lessons, and they wouldn't have called it diversity in those days. But it was very diverse, and there are some really interesting lessons about why that worked, why that mix of people and minds and approaches worked, and how you can try and replicate that in a more modern environment. Trying to get the right mixture of people with the right skills is still critical. It's all about people, not technology in the end. Technology is secondary. And in my educational role, it's about identifying people from whatever background and whatever area who have the ability and talent to come through. New technology, and particularly social media companies, pose a huge challenge to democratic processes and elections around the world, especially this year where there are so many countries holding elections. And I think democracies were quite late to spot this a few years ago, and even now are struggling to know what to do about it, because even before the rise of AI and deepfakes, the influence of social media companies, the way they could be manipulated by foreign states, by nation states, was really alarming, and we saw some pretty bad examples of that in previous elections. Now, on top of that, you've got the creation of fake material, deepfake material, that undermines people's trust in their politicians, in the system, in what's being said. And that is a whole new problem on top of the general abuse of social media to influence people. So that's going to be a major challenge for democracies in the next 10 years. How do we tackle that as governments, as companies, as societies? And I don't think anyone has an answer at the moment.